morning, folks, wherever you are out there. Welcome. You are listening to the Charge Life podcast. I am Joseph Barletta, and this is where we discuss EVs and all things EV charging. So glad you could pull over and park with us today. Hey, let's get plugged in. Hey, look, today's episode's all about why we need to standardize Tesla's NACS charging port location. You're going to love this one. Before we begin, today's episode is brought to you by Smart Charge America. Since 2007, Smart Charge America has installed tens of thousands of EV charging stations nationwide, and they can do the same for you today. Whether in the home, commercial, service, let their team of expert installation specialists guide you to the best solution for your new electric car. After all, if you can't charge, you can't drive. Visit smartchargeamerica.com today to get started. All right. Why we need to standardize Tesla's NACS charging port location. Here, I've kind of started conjuring this up for the most part, and I've been preaching this for years and years and years, ever since the kind of the debut of the supercharger network and kind of the rollout of the public infrastructure that Tesla themselves has decided to support. You see this overwhelming majority of charging station, kind of design criteria allocated around a specific OEM's charging port location, which vis-a-vis is Tesla's, right? So what we know is, currently there are 5 different charging port locations on, kind of all the standard EVs out there, okay? You have the driver's front, which you'll find I would say maybe your Asian, Japanese, Chinese, made vehicles right in the front. Then you have your driver's front, you have your driver's rear, you have your passenger front, and you have your passenger rear. So we'll kind of go over a couple of those, but that's generally what we're seeing is that 5 distinct charging port locations, and yeah, there may be a 6th one all the way in the back, but we rarely see those. Those are generally maybe on a few custom conversion enthusiasts, so forth and so on. But with 5 generalized charging port locations with 27 different auto EV OEMs out there, you can see the amount of different types of models and makes and how this stuff can get really complex really fast. And so what we wanted to do is, kind of look at the different factors that, I guess, bring all of this together. You're looking at your charge port location, you're looking at kind of door sizes, opening techniques, face, depths, how close or how far inside the charging inlet the actual port is located. Look at locking mechanisms. Some electric vehicles, believe it or not, they can lock that connector in place, and others you could just go in and take out. So you have to look at all of these things when it comes to standardizing, kind of chart, charging port locations or charging port types and charging port locations. We're just talking about charging port locations. That's it. That's all we're talking about here. Just charging port locations. And so, I think that if you look at, all the OEMs now that have finally settled on a single charging connector type, we had the J1772, the CCS, the CHAdeMO, the Tesla standard, and now we've all, as an industry, we're taking those 4 different types of connectors and we're consolidating them into one, which is that NACS connector. Now, this is really good for the future advent, acceleration of electric vehicle adoption, okay? Now, if you can take that and have standardized port and then a standardized port location on all vehicles in America, I think that definitely bodes well for where we actually need to be. So, looking at that, what we wanted to do was, I guess, kind of look at the early adopters and how, early adopters and innovators, yeah, we were kind of this, but now we're kind of looking at the majority adopters, and we're kind of looking at going up that S curve, and what does it look like when we have, 20 million, 30 million electric vehicles on the road? How are we supposed to design this to where it's just as user-friendly, when it goes to the DC fast charging model and the depot gas station refilling model, as opposed to the destination charging model? It does kind of lead to the question where if the industry is able to come together and consolidate all the connectors into one, why aren't we able to come together and actually consolidate the charging port locations into one? And that's what we're here to discuss about. Hey, go ahead and click on the thumbs up icon if you guys can. It's down below. It's got a little thumb like this. Go ahead and click on it. Maybe even sound the alarm on the bell. We'll send you alerts when we actually broadcast these. But needless to say, one of the reasons why we think here at Smart Charge America the charging port location is like standardizing that location is extremely important, is because it will help accelerate local building codes with regards to residential and commercial, even industrial applications. They could all be written to support in a way that's easy for us to basically adopt building code standards, so we can include this charging infrastructure in place, and by having that single port location and port type, I think it's going to make it really easy for municipalities, others to actually adopt building codes that they want to see put in place. If you have one standard, one connector, one location, it's easier to say, hey, look, we, prefer, all your charging, station circuits be this location in every single garage, or, all your, I guess, if you're looking at like, knee-high walls or parking garages and stuff like that, you can allocate to where you can design building code around those things. Now, that's, hinting on whether or not a vehicle actually front loads in or back loads into the actual parking slot. But if you can have a single standard location, and you can actually start getting in with these charging station, providers that actually will be able to design their site with a lot more, maybe even a couple more charging stations as a result of the way that it's actually designed, because it meets the criteria across the board and everyone matches. Everyone's actually able to, utilize each one of those charging stations accordingly. So, one of the various factors that we noted when it comes to, I guess, why EV charging port locations are on different locations of the EV, it's kind of like, basically we can only assume that it's more like gas station, gas cars. When you have gas vehicles, most of them have the charging indicator. If you look on the dash, on the little gasometer or whatever they call it, it's on the little gas station icon, you'll see an arrow pointing this way or this way, and that will tell you where your charging, your gas station port is, to fill up gas. And EVs have the same thing with regards to like where that arrow is pointing. So that's convenient for the user, of course, which is great. However, what we wanted to do is basically look into like the different factors. Most of in the gas car world, it's more convenient. It's like basically, well, what side of the road do you drive on? In Europe, they drive on the left, and parts of Europe they drive on the left, and of course in the U.S. we drive on the right side. And so a lot of U.S. manufacturers have the gas port location on the the left side for convenience, and some of them have it on the right side for convenience. It just depends on like kind of where that driver's, I guess, steering wheel is located. And so depending on like that convenience, you look at road traffic patterns, and vehicle design overall, like kind of where that gas tank is going to be, positioned in the car. Some of it has to do with, weight distribution with regards to, kind of balance the center of gravity is on the vehicle itself, curb weight and all that stuff. It does have effects. And so if you have an OEM that's basically designing a car and kind of in Europe, but then worldwide, it might be easier for them to, change maybe a connector type as opposed to the actual charging port location. I don't see any reason why it would be that hard, but you have the design, the mold of the vehicle, and the doors and the opening mechanisms, locking. You have a lot of stuff that kind of complements that charging port location. But I think if we can get there, if we can get there, I think it'll be easier for everyone. Now, if you look at the driver's rear tail light, that's the Tesla standard. That's the gold standard. That's where I'd like to see the charging station industry get to, or I guess you could call it the EV industry get to, with regards to the charging port location. Now, we know Tesla already has the largest EV charging fleet and the largest amount of EVs on the road today. They position their charging port on driver's rear taillight. And so the second best, I guess you would say, is the driver's front. And so you have many of the legacy OEMs that are choosing this location for that kind of basically front load parking convenience, because they see, okay, well, 9 times out of 10 people front load into their parking spaces, and so we're going to put it in the front as opposed to putting it in the rear. And so you also have the vehicle front, like we talked about, those the Asian manufacturers, typically foreign EV OEMs will choose to put that location there, and I think it's because of just the ease of access and that front load. That charging station's right there. They can minimize cable management, and go from there. Cable management, cable lengths as well, make it really convenient for not only the manufacturer that's providing the charger, but also the user, where they don't have a lot of cable management, so they can just boom, plug and play. If you look at the passenger front, very few EVs actually have that location. Only one that comes to mind is Porsche, the Taycan. Actually, there's like I think a J1772 and a CCS connector on one, and then a J1772 and or a CCS connector on one. I don't have a Taycan. Audience members, you guys might be able to put in the comments below, but that's the only other front charging port location that we've seen or that we're familiar with. Then you also have the passenger rear location, which honestly is becoming a lot more popular as you see the legacy OEMs, basically both foreign and domestic, complement Western driving rules and directional curbside parking in many urban areas. You got the advent of, like, I guess, BMW, and then the Kias and the Hyundais. I believe they all have it. And then you have Rivian that just released their R3 and their R2 models, with the driver's rear. And so we're like, we mentioned this before, but the reason why OEMs state that they're doing it in the passenger rear is to be able to align with off-street parking, because when you drive on the right side of the road, most of your off-street parking will be towards that right side. And so if your charging station is on the curb, then it's a lot more convenient for you to be able to charge your vehicle there, as opposed to the driver's rear, where all the DC fast charging systems are designed for Tesla. So I see the argument in both ways. I just think that we need to come to a standard. Now, the good news is that we've seen the new V4 superchargers that Tesla are putting in the ground. Typically, a Tesla supercharger stall would be installed kind of towards the tail end of the parking lot line there. So that way the driver can actually back in, okay, and it's right there on that parking line. So what the V4 charging stations have done with a slightly longer cable, it's about 3 feet longer in cable length, is that they've positioned that supercharger stall, instead of like kind of over here on the side, they've actually, on the back side, I guess in y'all's case it'd be this side right here, right? So if you're looking looking into it, the charging stations were usually placed here. Tesla has basically repositioned those charging stalls like right in the middle. And so with that, as a Tesla driver comes in, they back in, they can still, with that added length cable, plug in, no problem. Those forward-facing EVs on the front, driver's side can also possibly, if they get close enough to that station, use that cable to go ahead and plug in. And then, of course, the rear chargers can do the same thing. They can back in and plug, and the rear, I guess back in for the rear, the rear passenger location. So some really cool stuff that we're seeing what's happening with the new V4 superchargers. They just need to start putting more of them in the ground, in the U.S. And so we're really excited to see that development as it goes on. But look, that's pretty much the conclusion of today's episode, was just to talk about like the importance of, if the industry did come together and standardize that charging port location, yes, it would make site design and make building code and make a lot of things easier. But I think there are some things that we could look forward to, like redesigning of those sites and possibly lengthening that charging cable. Now, Tesla, there is a weighted cost benefits to actually extending that charging cable. The more copper you add into there, the heavier that cable gets. And so with liquid, cooled immersion technology that the Tesla charging cables have inside there, they're trying to make those cables lighter for the end user, but also more flexible to be able to plug into those charging port locations. And so I think that if we can maybe get more and more people to look towards maybe the rear of the car instead of the front, maybe that's something that we can do. But ideal wise, if we can have everyone move over to that driver's rear tail light location, I think it'll make a lot more of the present charging stations in the ground more familiar and allow more like better, basically better design, better building code requirements, better active use with regards to participating in the actual overall EV charging site design and setup. So anyway, that's our episode today. Look, I wanted to thank you guys so much for our listeners and subscribers today for your attention. I hope today's episode's brought to you all just a little bit more, I guess, value to your day. And I know we're all better for it. Look, I love you guys. I know we can't do this episode without you, so I definitely appreciate it. And go ahead and click the thumbs up icon if you can. Share, comment, subscribe below if you think we earned it. And, again, thanks again for charging up with us today. You can always find us at smartchargeamerica.com. And remember, folks, if you can't charge,